There is blood everywhere, and this animal is killing me. That is what Hua screamed into her iPhone, while my 100-pound golden retriever named Barnaby was actually lying on his back in the grass, begging for a belly rub from the police officer. I stood there, wrapped in a towel, dripping wet and shivering from adrenaline, looking at the destruction in my backyard. The pool liner was slashed, the water was flooding into the neighbor's garden, and there was Hua standing in her soaked designer heels, holding a jagged piece of PVC pipe like a weapon, demanding that the officers shoot my dog. It was the most insane moment of my life. But to understand why a grown woman would break into my property to fight a swimming pool, you have to understand the war that started 3 months ago. It all began on the most boring Tuesday imaginable. I had just closed on this house. It was my dream home, a nice 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet cul-de-sac with a big fenced yard. That yard was the selling point. I have Barnaby, and for the last 4 years we lived in a cramped apartment where he barely had room to turn around. This house was supposed to be our sanctuary. It was supposed to be the place where I could finally breathe. I remember standing on the back porch that first morning, drinking coffee and watching Barnaby zoom around the grass. It was peaceful. It was perfect. I thought I had made it. Then I heard the clicking. It was a sharp, rhythmic sound coming from the side gate. Click, click, click. I walked around the corner of the house and saw a woman standing on my driveway. She was wearing a white blazer that looked like it cost more than my car, giant sunglasses that covered half her face, and holding a clipboard. She was tapping a pen against the metal clip. This was my first introduction to Hua. She did not say hello. She did not say welcome to the neighborhood. She simply pointed the pen at my trash can and said, "That needs to be moved 3 inches to the left." I laughed because I thought she was joking. I walked over, extended my hand, and introduced myself. I told her I was the new owner. Hua did not shake my hand. She looked at my hand, then looked at my face, then looked back at the trash can. She told me that she was the president of the Homeowners Association, and that strict adherence to the visual guidelines was what kept the property values high. She said that my trash can was currently violating Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the bylaws because it was visible from the street at an obtuse angle. I was still in the honeymoon phase of home ownership, so I just smiled, moved the can, and apologized. I did not know that apologize was the wrong word. With Hua, apologizing is just admitting defeat. It is like bleeding in shark-infested waters. Over the next few weeks, the piece I paid $350,000 for began to evaporate. Every day I came home from work, there would be a note taped to my front door. It was never a friendly note. It was always on official HOA letterhead, signed by HOA. One day, the grass was 1/4 of an inch too high. The next day, my curtains were the wrong shade of off-white. Apparently, I had eggshell, and the bylaws required cream. I started to dread the sound of her heels clicking on the pavement. I would see her white luxury SUV patrolling the street, slowing down every time it passed my house. She would lower the window just enough to glare at my property, looking for anything out of place. The real trouble started when I decided to put in the pool. It was getting into summer, the temperatures were hitting 90 degrees, and I had a huge empty space in the backyard. I did everything by the book. I went to the city, I got the permits, I hired a licensed contractor. I even checked the HOA bylaws 3 times to make sure above-ground pools were allowed if they were behind a 6-foot privacy fence. They were. I was in the clear. Or so I thought. The morning the contractors arrived, Hoa was there before they even unloaded the truck. She stood at the end of my driveway with her arms crossed, blocking the path of the excavator. My contractor, a nice guy named Dave, came knocking on my door at 7 in the morning. He told me there was a lady refusing to move and threatening to sue his company. I went outside in my bathrobe to find Hoa screaming at these poor workers. She was telling them that they were destroying the aesthetic integrity of the community. I walked down the driveway and asked her to move. Hoa turned to me, whipped off her sunglasses, and gave me a look that could curdle milk. She said I did not have approval from the architectural committee. I told her I did not need it because the bylaws stated that backyard modifications not visible from the street were exempt from committee review. I had done my homework. I cited the page number. Hoa did not like that. Her face turned a shade of red that clashed with her lipstick. She stepped up to me, invading my personal space, and poked me in the chest with a manicured finger. She told me that she was the committee. She said she decided what was exempt and what was not. She told me that if I dug one shovel of dirt in this yard, she would bury me in fines until I lost the house. Then she looked at Barnaby, who was watching from the window, and said that beast was probably a violation too. I told the contractors to proceed. I told HOA that if she did not get off my driveway, I would call the police for trespassing. She gasped like I had slapped her.
She pulled her phone out and started recording me, saying she was documenting my aggression. But she moved. She got in her car and peeled out of the cul-de-sac, but not before yelling that this was not over. The pool went up in 3 days. It was beautiful. It was a 24-foot round pool with a custom deck. I spent an extra $2,000 on landscaping just to make it look nice, planting tall hedges along the fence line for extra privacy. For a week, it was paradise. I would float in the water after work with a cold drink. Barnaby would patrol the deck, occasionally barking at a squirrel, but mostly just napping in the sun. I thought I had won. I thought HOA had realized she had no power here. But HOA was not retreating. She was reloading. The letters started coming in the mail. Certified mail. The first one was a fine for $500 for unauthorized construction. I disputed it with the management company, sending them the copy of the bylaws. They dropped the fine. 2 days later, another fine arrived. This one was for $1,000. The citation was for excessive noise. It claimed that my pool pump was exceeding the decibel limit for the neighborhood. I bought a decibel meter. The pump was quieter than a whisper. I disputed the fine again. Then she came for the dog. I received a notice stating that Barnaby had been reported as a dangerous animal. The report, signed by HOA, claimed that he had lunged at her through the fence and that he barked for 6 hours straight every night. This was a lie. Barnaby sleeps in my bed every night. He snores, but he does not bark, and he has never lunged at anyone in his life. He's the kind of dog that is afraid of thunder and brings you his favorite stuffed hedgehog when you are sad. I went to the next HOA board meeting to defend myself. I walked into the community center, and there she was, sitting at the head of the table like a queen on a throne. HOA smiled when I walked in. It was a cold, predatory smile. I presented my evidence. I had video from my security cameras showing Barnaby sleeping when she claimed he was barking. I had the specs for the pool pump. I had the city permits. The other board members looked uncomfortable. They knew she was crazy, but they were afraid of her. HOA dismissed my evidence. She said security cameras can be doctored. She said city permits do not supersede the high standards of her community. She told me that I had 30 days to remove the pool and the dog, or she would put a lien on my house. I left that meeting shaking with rage. I am a calm person. I work in accounting. I like spreadsheets and order. I do not like conflict, but this woman was trying to take away my home and my dog just because she needed to feel powerful.
I decided to stop engaging. I stopped reading her letters. I blocked her number. I put a padlock on my back gate. I just wanted to live my life. That brings us to last Saturday. It was the hottest day of the year, 102 degrees. The humidity was suffocating. I had invited a few friends over for a barbecue, but they canceled at the last minute, so it was just me and Barnaby. I was floating on a raft in the pool, wearing my sunglasses, listening to a podcast. The water was cool. The world felt distant. I had almost forgotten about HOA. I remember closing my eyes and thinking about how lucky I was. The grill was heating up. I had a steak marinating in the fridge. Barnaby was chewing on a bone in the shade of the umbrella. It was the definition of a lazy Saturday. I was drifting, half asleep, letting the water rock me back and forth. Then I heard the sound. It was metal screeching against wood. It was coming from the back gate, the gate I had padlocked. I sat up on the raft, taking off my sunglasses. I listened. There it was again, a loud, grinding noise, followed by a heavy thud. Someone was trying to force the gate open. Barnaby stood up, his ears perked forward. He let out a low woof, not aggressive, just alerting me. I yelled out, asking who was there. I figured it might be the meter reader or maybe a kid retrieving a ball. There was no answer, just another loud bang, and then the sound of wood splintering. The top hinge of the gate gave way. I scrambled off the raft, splashing into the water. My heart started pounding. I waded toward the edge of the pool, trying to see over the deck railing. Suddenly, the gate flew open with a violent crash. And there she was, HOA. But she did not look like the composed, icy president of the HOA anymore. She looked unhinged. She was wearing a pink tracksuit with rhinestones on the back that spelled out Queen. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was slightly frizzy from the humidity. In one hand, she held a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters. In the other, she was gripping a long, jagged piece of white PVC pipe that looked like she had ripped it off a sprinkler system. She marched into my backyard like she was storming a beach. She did not look at me. She looked directly at the pool. Her eyes were wide, manic. She was muttering something to herself over and over. I think she was saying, "Not in my neighborhood." I shouted at her to get out. I told her she was trespassing. Hoa did not stop. She walked right past Barnaby, who was backing away because he sensed the crazy energy radiating off her. She marched up the steps of the pool deck. I was standing chest deep in the water, looking up at her. She stood at the edge of the pool, looming over me. She looked down with pure disgust. She said I had ignored her warnings. She said I thought I was above the law. She said she was going to fix the property value problem herself. I warned her. I told her if she touched anything, I would press charges. Hona laughed. It was a high-pitched, hysterical sound. She raised the bolt cutters. I thought she was going to throw them at me, so I ducked under the water. But she did not throw them. She swung them down, smashing the solar lights I had mounted on the railing. Glass shattered into the water. Then she dropped the bolt cutters and gripped the PVC pipe with both hands like a baseball bat. She looked at the vinyl liner of the pool, the part that overlapped the metal wall. She raised the pipe over her head. I screamed at her to stop. She swung. The jagged edge of the pipe tore into the liner. Water started spurting out. She swung again and again. She was screaming with every swing, hacking at the side of my pool like a lumberjack. The hole tore open. Thousands of gallons of water began to rush out, creating a massive geyser that soaked her instantly. She did not care. She stood there in the deluge, soaking wet, stabbing the pool liner. The water level dropped rapidly. I lost my footing as the current dragged me toward the tear. I managed to grab the ladder. Barnaby, seeing me struggling and hearing the chaos, started barking. It was his deep, protective bark. He ran up the stairs of the deck, barking at Hona to stop hurting his human. Hona spun around. She saw the dog, and that is when she flipped the script. She reached into her wet pocket and pulled out her phone. She dialed 911. I watched in horror as she put the phone to her ear, looked directly at my dog who was standing 5 feet away, wagging his tail uncertainly, and started screaming. She screamed, "Help me! Oh my God, help me!" She screamed that a vicious dog was attacking her. She screamed that she was bleeding. She screamed that the owner was commanding the beast to kill her. She was performing a one-woman show for the emergency operator, all while standing in the wreckage of my pool. I climbed out of the water, grabbing a towel. I was in shock. I stood there watching her lie to the police. I realized then that this was not just about a pool or a trash can. This was a person who had lost her grip on reality. She wanted to be the victim so badly that she created a disaster just to play the part. The sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Hona looked at me, phone still to her ear, and smirked. She mouthed the words, "You lose." But she did not know about the security camera mounted under the eaves of my roof, the one with the 4K resolution and the microphone. The one that was blinking red, recording every single second of her rampage. The police cruiser screeched to a halt in front of my house. 2 officers ran into the backyard, hands on their holsters, expecting a bloodbath. They saw me, wet and shivering. They saw Barnaby, sitting down and tilting his head. And they saw Hoa holding a piece of pipe, standing in a mud pit of her own making. The first officer looked at the destroyed pool, then at Hoa and asked, "Ma'am, please put down the pipe." Hoa dropped the pipe and immediately burst into fake tears, pointing a shaking finger at Barnaby. She sobbed, "That monster tried to rip my throat out. I had to defend myself. Look at what it did to the pool during the struggle." I just pointed at the camera. I said, "Officer, I would like you to watch the video before you do anything else." Hoa's face went pale, the color drained right out of her cheeks. She looked up at the little red light blinking under the roof, and for the first time in 3 months, she was silent. The officer looked at me, then at the camera, then back at Hoa. He pulled out his handcuffs. That was the moment I knew the setup was over and the real justice was about to begin.
The officer did not hesitate. He did not ask Hwea for her side of the story again. He did not ask me if I wanted to talk it out. He had seen the manic look in her eyes, the weapon at her feet, and the destruction she had caused. And most importantly, he had seen the camera. He stepped around the mud puddle, his boots squelching in the mess Hwea had made, and reached for her wrist. Hwea recoiled like she had been burned. She snatched her hand away and took a step back, her heels sinking deep into the sodden earth. She looked at the officer with a mixture of confusion and absolute fury. "Excuse me," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Do not touch me. Do you know who I am? I am the president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I am the victim here. That man set his beast on me. Arrest him." The officer was calm. He was a tall man with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Miller. Officer Miller did not care about the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. He moved forward, closing the distance, and grabbed her wrist firmly this time. He spun her around before she could swing her purse at him. "Ma'am, you are under arrest," Officer Miller said, his voice flat and professional. Hwea let out the screech that sounded like a bandsaw hitting a nail. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated outrage. She started thrashing, trying to kick the officer with her muddy designer heels. She screamed that this was police brutality. She screamed that she knew the chief of police and that Officer Miller would be directing traffic in a school zone by tomorrow morning if he did not unhand her immediately. The second officer, a younger woman, stepped in to help secure Hwea's other arm. They clicked the handcuffs into place. That sound, that distinct metallic click, it was better than any symphony I have ever heard. It cut through the humidity and the sound of Hwea's shrieking like a knife. The metal bit into her wrists, and for a split second she went silent. She looked down at her hands, bound behind her back, in total disbelief. I stood there, wrapped in my towel, stroking Barnaby's head. My dog was leaning against my leg, still watching Hwea with wide, worried eyes. I told him he was a good boy. I told him he was brave. He licked my hand, his tail giving a tentative thump against my leg. We watched as the officers marched Hwea toward the side gate, the gate she had destroyed. But Hwea was not going to go quietly. As they dragged her through the splintered remains of the wood she had smashed, she dug her heels in. She turned her head back toward me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. Her pink tracksuit was stained with mud and pool water. She looked like a swamp monster in rhinestones.
"You will pay for this," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I will sue you. I will take your house. I will have that dog put down if it is the last thing I do. This isn't over, do you hear me? I am Hoa. I run this neighborhood." The officers pushed her forward, forcing her out of the backyard and onto the driveway. I followed them, mostly because I wanted to make sure they had the footage, but partly because I am petty and I wanted to see her get put in the car. When we got to the front of the house, I realized we had an audience. The sirens had woken up the entire cul-de-sac. Neighbors were standing on their porches in their pajamas. Mr. Henderson from across the street was holding a cup of coffee, watching with a grin on his face. The young couple from next door, the ones Hoa had fined $300 for leaving a bicycle on their porch for 1 hour, were recording the whole thing on their phones. Hoa saw them. For a narcissist like her, this was the true injury. Being arrested was bad, but being arrested in front of the people she terrorized was unbearable. She tried to straighten her posture. She tried to look dignified while covered in mud and handcuffed. She lifted her chin and glared at Mr. Henderson. "Go back inside," she yelled at him. "This is official HOA business. There is nothing to see here." Mr. Henderson just raised his coffee mug in a mock toast and took a long, slow sip. Officer Miller opened the back door of the cruiser. He had to put his hand on top of Hoa's head to guide her in, like she was a common criminal. Because she was. She resisted one last time, stiffening her legs, refusing to sit. The officer had to firmly push her inside. When the door slammed shut, it was the final period at the end of a very long, very exhausting sentence. I walked up to Officer Miller. He was wiping mud off his uniform. I asked him if he needed the footage right now. He looked at me, then looked at the cruiser where Hoa was currently headbutting the window and screaming silently behind the glass. He told me to email it to him immediately. He said that based on what he saw, the weapon, the destruction, the forced entry, they had enough to hold her.
He pulled out a notepad. He told me that she was going to be charged with felony destruction of property, breaking and entering, filing a false police report, and resisting arrest. I felt a weight lift off my chest that I did not even know was there. Felony. That was a serious word. That was not a $50 fine for a trash can violation. That was prison time. That was a criminal record. I asked the officer what I should do about the pool. It was still draining, the water flooding the side yard. He told me to take pictures of everything, every inch of damage. The gate, the lights, the liner.
The mud. He told me to get estimates for repairs as soon as possible and to keep every single receipt. He said the court would need a dollar amount for restitution. Then he looked at Barnaby. The officer knelt down and held out a hand. Barnaby, being the vicious killer HORA claimed he was, immediately trotted over and buried his face in the officer's chest, looking for ear scratches. Officer Miller laughed. He said his partner had a golden retriever at home and that he knew a dangerous dog when he saw one. This was not it. He told me to keep the dog inside for the night, just to be safe, but that I had nothing to worry about regarding animal control. The video would clear Barnaby completely. The police cars drove away, lights flashing, taking HORA to the county jail. The silence that followed was heavy. It was hot, humid, and quiet. The neighbors slowly went back inside, giving me little waves of solidarity as they retreated. I walked back to my backyard. It was a disaster zone. My beautiful pool, the one I had saved for, the one I had fought for, was empty. The liner was shredded ribbons of blue vinyl. The metal wall was dented where she had hacked at it. My yard was a swamp. The solar lights were broken glass glittering in the mud. The gate was hanging off one hinge. I stood there and looked at the ruin. A normal person might have cried. A normal person might have felt defeated. But I did not feel defeated. I looked at the security camera blinking under the eaves. I looked at the empty spot where HORA had stood. And I smiled. She had destroyed my pool, that was true. It would cost thousands to fix. It would be a headache. But she had also destroyed herself. She had given me the one thing I needed to win this war permanently. She had given me leverage. She had given me a felony. I spent the next hour documenting the scene. I took photos from every angle. I took close-ups of the PVC pipe she left behind. I took video of the water damage to the landscaping. I sat down at my computer and downloaded the footage from the security camera. I watched it 3 times. It was perfect. The audio was crisp. You could hear the gate breaking. You could hear her muttering. You could hear her threats. And most importantly, you could hear her lie to the 911 operator while my dog was standing 5 feet away, wagging his tail. I saved the file in 3 different places. I emailed it to Officer Miller, I emailed a copy to my lawyer, and then, just for insurance, I saved a copy to a flash drive and put it in my safe. I ordered a pizza. I gave Barnaby a steak bone. We sat in the living room, in the air conditioning, and enjoyed the silence. For the first time in 3 months, I did not have to worry about a note on my door.
I did not have to worry about the sound of heels clicking on my driveway. The queen of the HOA was in a holding cell, probably demanding to speak to the manager of the jail. But if I thought that was the end of it, I was naive. I underestimated the power of the HOA machine. I underestimated the loyalty of Homa's minions. And I definitely underestimated Homa's husband. The next morning, Sunday, I woke up to a pounding on my front door. It was not the police. It was not a delivery driver. I checked the doorbell camera on my phone before getting out of bed. Standing on my porch was a man in a suit. It was 90 degrees out at 8 in the morning, and this man was wearing a full 3-piece charcoal suit. He was holding a briefcase. He looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that built corporate lawyers. This was Richard, Homa's husband. I had never met Richard. He was a ghost in the neighborhood. People said he was a high-powered attorney who worked in the city and only came home to sleep. Rumor had it he was the one who bankrolled Homa's lifestyle and cleaned up her messes. I put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and opened the door. I did not step out. I stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. Barnaby stood behind me, letting out a low rumble of a growl. He knew something was off. Richard did not introduce himself. He did not apologize for his wife destroying my property. He simply held out a thick envelope. "Mr. Thompson," he said. His voice was smooth, polished, and completely devoid of emotion. "I am representing my wife in this unfortunate misunderstanding." I laughed. I actually laughed in his face.
I asked him if he called breaking and entering and felony vandalism a misunderstanding. Richard did not blink. He adjusted his silk tie. He said that his wife was under a lot of stress. He said that she had a medical condition that made her sensitive to noise and visual chaos. He said that my pool and my dog had triggered a psychological episode. Then came the pivot. He tapped the envelope against his hand. He said that they were willing to make this go away. He said the envelope contained a check for $10,000. That was enough to repair the pool and the gate, with plenty left over for my trouble. All you have to do, Richard said, is sign a non-disclosure agreement and drop the charges. You tell the police it was a misunderstanding. You tell them you invited her over and things got out of hand. You withdraw the video. I looked at the envelope. $10,000. It was tempting for about 1 second. It would fix the pool immediately. No court dates, no lawyers, no stress. But then I thought about Homa's face when she smashed my lights. I thought about the fear in the contractor's eyes.
I thought about the lie she told the police, the lie that could have gotten my dog killed. If Officer Miller had been trigger happy, Barnaby would be dead right now because of her. Money cannot fix that. Money cannot buy permission to terrorize a community. I looked Richard in the eye. I told him to get off my porch. I told him that his wife committed a felony on camera and that I would see them in court. I told him that $10,000 was an insult and that I was going to sue them for everything they had. Richard's smooth mask slipped for just a second. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. He put the envelope back in his pocket. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "You are making a mistake," he said softly. "You do not want to fight us. We have resources you cannot imagine. If you pursue this, we will countersue. We will find every violation, every permit error, every loophole. We will drain you dry before you ever step foot in a courtroom." I stepped forward and pointed to the doorbell camera. I asked him if he wanted to add witness tampering and intimidation to the family's list of charges. Richard looked at the camera. He tightened his jaw. He turned around without another word and walked back to his block luxury sedan parked at the curb. I shut the door and locked it. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. They were scared. They were trying to buy me off because they knew they were in trouble. Homea was not just a crazy neighbor anymore. She was a liability, and they were circling the wagons. I called my lawyer immediately. I told him about Richard's visit. My lawyer, a shark of a man named Saul, who I hired specifically because he hated HOAs, was ecstatic. He told me to write down every word Richard said. He said that attempting to bribe a witness was a gift. He said we were going to add it to the civil suit. Monday morning, the war officially moved from the backyard to the inbox. I received an email from the property management company. It was a notice of an emergency board meeting. The topic, the removal of the president. Apparently, the video of Homea's arrest had made the rounds. The neighbors who recorded it had posted it on the neighborhood Facebook group. Then someone posted it on TikTok. By Monday morning, it had 2 million views. The comments were brutal. Everyone was calling for her head. The other board members, the ones who had been terrified of her, finally smelled blood in the water. They were scrambling to distance themselves from the pool slasher. I went to that meeting. It was held in the community center, the same room where Homea had tried to take my house. But this time, Homea was not there. Her chair at the head of the table was empty. The vice president, a nervous man named Gary, called the meeting to order. He looked like he was about to vomit. He said that in light of recent events, the board had voted to remove Homa from her position, effective immediately. He said they were conducting a full audit of the HOA finances. He said they were revoking all fines issued by Homa in the last 6 months, pending review. The room erupted in applause. People were cheering. It was like the end of a dictatorship. I sat in the back and just watched. It felt good, but I knew it wasn't over. The criminal case was still looming. 2 weeks later, the preliminary hearing took place. I had to go to the courthouse to give a statement. I saw Homa in the hallway. She was out on bail. She was not wearing a tracksuit. She was wearing a modest gray dress and pearls. She looked like a sweet grandmother. She was clinging to Richard's arm, looking frail and victimized. When she saw me, the mask slipped again, just for a second. She glared at me with that same manic intensity I saw in the backyard. She mouthed something at me. I couldn't hear it, but I could read her lips perfectly. She said, "You will regret this." I didn't regret it. I walked into that courtroom and I told the judge exactly what happened. We played the video.
The judge, a stern woman with glasses, watched the footage of Homa hacking at my pool. She watched Homa lie to the operator. She watched Homa scream at the officers. When the video ended, the courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Homa. She looked at Richard. She looked at the defense attorney who was trying to argue that the video was taken out of context. The judge adjusted her glasses. She said that in 20 years on the bench, she had never seen a more clear-cut case of malicious intent. She denied the motion to dismiss. She set the trial date. And then she did something that made me want to stand up and cheer. She issued a restraining order. She ordered Homa to stay 500 feet away from me, my property, and my dog at all times. Since Homa lived 3 doors down, this was a problem. 500 feet meant she could not even enter her own cul-de-sac without violating the order. She gave her 24 hours to vacate her home and find somewhere else to live until the trial was over. I watched Homa's face crumble. The reality finally hit her. She wasn't going home. She was being kicked out of her own kingdom. The day she left was a holiday in the neighborhood. Moving trucks showed up at her house. Richard was shouting at the movers. Homa was sitting in her car, wearing big sunglasses, hiding her face. As they drove away, Mr. Henderson started clapping from his porch. Then the couple next door joined in. Soon, the whole street was clapping.
It was a slow, rhythmic applause that followed her SUV all the way out of the subdivision. It has been 6 months since that day. Their criminal trial is next week. She is facing 3 years in prison. My civil suit is asking for $50,000 in damages and emotional distress. We settled with the HOA insurance for the cost of the pool plus legal fees. I have a new pool now. It is bigger. It has a waterfall. And right next to the gate, I put up a new sign. It doesn't say beware of dog. It says, smile, you're on camera. Barnaby and I sit out there every evening. It is quiet, the water is cool, and sometimes when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear the phantom sound of clicking heels. But then I look at the empty house down the street with the for sale sign in the yard, and I remember that the Wicked Witch is gone, and she is never coming back.
I really thought the restraining order was the end of it. I thought the sight of Hwaya being dragged away in handcuffs was the season finale, but I was wrong. That was just the cliffhanger. I forgot one fundamental rule about narcissists. They do not know how to lose. They only know how to double down. 3 days before the criminal trial, I was at the local grocery store. It is the only high-end market in town, the kind of place where they sell organic asparagus water for $8. I was just trying to buy milk. I was minding my own business. I was happy. Then I heard it. That voice. It cuts through the air like a dentist's drill. Excuse me, this melon is bruised. I demand a fresh one from the back. My blood ran cold. I froze in the middle of the dairy aisle. I knew that voice. I looked through the gap between the yogurt and the cheese, and there she was, Hwaya. She was not supposed to be there. The restraining order was clear, 500 feet. If I am there, she has to leave. That is the law. But Hwaya does not care about the law. To Hwaya, the law is just a suggestion for poor people. She looked different. She wasn't wearing the tracksuit. She was wearing a beige trench coat and giant sunglasses, like she was incognito. But you cannot hide that attitude. She was berating a 16-year-old stock boy because the cantaloupe wasn't spherical enough. I had a choice. I could leave, I could walk out the back door, get in my car, and go home. That would be the smart thing to do. That would be the safe thing to do. But then I remembered my pool. I remembered Barnaby shaking with fear. I remembered Richard trying to buy me off with hush money. I took my phone out. I started recording. I walked around the corner of the aisle. I stood 20 feet away from her. I didn't say a word. I just held up the phone. Hwaya sensed me. It was like a disturbance in the force. She stopped yelling at the boy and whipped her head around. Her sunglasses slid down her nose. Her eyes locked onto mine. For a second, she looked terrified. She knew she was violating the order. She knew one call to Officer Miller would revoke her bail. She should have run. A normal person would have run. But Hwaya is not normal. Hwaya is a combatant. Instead of running, she puffed up her chest. She fixed her sunglasses. She grabbed her cart and marched straight toward me. The wheels of her cart squeaked on the linoleum. It sounded like a tank rolling into battle. I stepped back. I warned her. I said, Hoya, you are violating the restraining order. You need to leave. She didn't stop. She rammed her cart into mine with a loud crash. Glass jars of salsa in my cart shattered. Red sauce exploded everywhere. It looked like a crime scene. She pointed a manicured finger in my face.
"You are stalking me," she screamed. Everyone in the store stopped. The music seemed to cut out. Shoppers froze with their hands on avocados. She screamed it again, louder this time. "Help! This man is stalking me. He is following me. He is obsessed with me." My jaw hit the floor. I couldn't believe the audacity. I pointed at the shattered salsa. I pointed at the camera in my hand. I told her she was insane. I told her I was just buying milk. Ha didn't listen. She turned to the crowd. She started performing. She grabbed the lapels of her trench coat and pulled them tight, acting like a damsel in distress. "He threatened me," she sobbed. "He threatened to set his dog on me again. Someone call the police." The store manager came running over. He was a guy named Steve. Poor Steve. He looked like he just wanted to survive his shift. He looked at the salsa on the floor. He looked at Ha, who was now hyperventilating on purpose. He looked at me. "Ma'am, what is the problem?" Steve asked. Ha spun on him. She unleashed the full power of a Karen. "This man is harassing me. I am a loyal customer. I spend thousands of dollars here. He is trash. He does not belong here. I want him removed immediately." I tried to speak. I tried to explain about the court order. I tried to show Steve the video on my phone. Ha slopped the phone out of my hand. It hit the ground and skittered across the tile floor. The screen cracked. That was it. That was the moment the switch flipped. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. I looked Steve in the eye. I told him to call the police. I told him to tell them that Ha was violating a felony bond condition and had just committed assault and property damage. Ha laughed. It was that same hysterical, high-pitched laugh from the backyard. "Do you know who my husband is?" she shrieked at Steve. "My husband will buy this store and fire you. My husband will sue you into oblivion. Get this stalker out of my sight." She grabbed a jar of pickles from the shelf. I don't know what she planned to do with it. Maybe she was going to throw it. Maybe she just needed a weapon. She held it over her head like a grenade. I stepped forward. I didn't back down. I looked her right in the eyes. I said, "Go ahead, Ha. Throw it. Please. Add another charge to the list. I want to see you try to explain this one to the judge next week." Her hand shook. The pickle jar trembled in the air. Her face turned purple. The veins in her neck were popping out. She realized she had lost the audience. The other shoppers weren't looking at her with sympathy. They were holding up their phones. They were recording her. She was trending again, and she didn't even know it. "Put the jar down, Ha," I said. "It is over." She looked around the store. She saw the wall of smartphones pointed at her. She saw the disgust on the faces of her peers. She saw Steve talking into his headset, calling security. She let out a sound of pure frustration. It wasn't a scream, it was a growl. She slammed the pickle jar back onto the shelf so hard it cracked. "I am not the criminal here," she yelled at the room. "I am the victim. You are all sheep. You don't understand what he did to my property values." Then she ran. She didn't walk. She sprinted toward the automatic doors, her trench coat flapping behind her like a cape. She abandoned her cart. She abandoned her melon. She just ran. I picked up my phone. The screen was shattered, but it was still recording. I stopped the video. I looked at Steve. I said, "I am really sorry about the salsa." Steve just shook his head. He looked at the door where Hua had vanished. He said, "Buddy, you don't have to apologize. I've seen crazy, but that was a whole new level." I paid for the salsa. I paid for the pickles she broke. I went to my car and called Officer Miller. I told him what happened. I sent him the video. He didn't even sound surprised. He just sighed. He said, "I will pick her up. Again." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up with Barnaby. I knew they would arrest her. I knew she was in deep trouble. But I also knew that a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. Hua had nothing left to lose. Her reputation was gone. Her home was gone. Her freedom was about to be gone. And then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. It was 2 a.m.
I answered it. I didn't say hello. I just listened. There was heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice. It wasn't Hua, it was deeper. It was smooth, but it was shaking with rage. You think you are clever, don't you? It was Richard. You think you can humiliate my wife? You think you can destroy my family? I told him I didn't destroy anything. I told him his wife did all the work herself. Richard laughed. It was a cold, dead sound. We are not done, he said. You want a war? You have no idea what war looks like. Check your email. The line went dead. I opened my laptop. I refreshed my inbox. There it was. An email from Richard's law firm. It wasn't a settlement offer. It wasn't a plea deal. It was a lawsuit. But not for the pool, not for the dog. They were suing me for defamation. They were suing me for emotional distress. They were suing me for invasion of privacy. And the amount? $10 million. They were trying to bury me. They knew they couldn't win the criminal case, so they decided to destroy my life financially. They wanted to make me bleed until I begged them to stop. I looked at Barnaby. He was sleeping peacefully, dreaming of chasing squirrels.
He didn't know that his owner was about to be bankrupt. He didn't know that the monsters down the street were coming for everything we had. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach. $10 million. I can't fight that. I can't afford the lawyers to fight that. But then I looked at the new folder on my desktop, the folder labeled Supermarket Freakout. I realized something. Richard was making the same mistake Hoa made. He thought he could bully me into silence. He thought money was the only power that mattered. He forgot about the internet. I didn't just send that video to the police. I didn't just send it to my lawyer. I logged into TikTok. I uploaded the video. I titled it, Karen Violates Restraining Order and Attacks Me with Pickles. I hit publish. If they wanted a war, I would give them a world war. I would let the court of public opinion decide who the real victim was. I went to bed. When I woke up, the world had changed. I opened my eyes and reached for my phone on the nightstand. It was buzzing. Not the gentle, rhythmic vibration of an alarm, but a continuous, angry hum that made the wood of the table rattle like a frightened skeleton. I unlocked the screen and the light blinded me, but not as much as the numbers did. The video of Hoa attacking me with a pickle jar had been up for 6 hours. It had 12 million views. My notifications were a blur of scrolling text. Twitter was trending with the hashtag #PickleKaren. TikTok was flooded with duets of people reenacting her scream. My inbox, the one Richard had tried to fill with a $10 million lawsuit, was now overflowing with emails from news producers, lawyers offering pro bono defense, and strangers offering to Barnaby a steak dinner. I walked to the window and peeked through the blinds. My quiet cul-de-sac looked like a carnival. There were 3 news vans parked on the street. A reporter was standing on the edge of my lawn, fixing her hair in a compact mirror. And across the street, Mr. Henderson was sitting in a lawn chair in his driveway, giving an interview to a cameraman while holding his coffee mug. I turned on the television. The local news was on. The anchor, a woman with a serious face, was talking about the viral video. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, Local Homeowners Association President Violates Restraining Order in Grocery Store Meltdown. Then the anchor said something that made me drop my coffee spoon. She said that the prestigious law firm representing the husband of the accused had issued a statement at 6 in the morning. I turned the volume up. The statement read, We are aware of the recent allegations and video footage involving the spouse of one of our partners. We would like to clarify that these actions do not represent the values of our firm. Effective immediately, Richard has been placed on indefinite unpaid leave pending an internal investigation. I felt a smile spread across my face that was so wide it actually hurt. Richard had tried to play hardball. He had tried to use his status and his money to crush me, but he forgot that his status depended on his reputation, and his reputation was now tied to a woman who threw pickles at neighbors in grocery stores. The $10 million lawsuit was dead in the water. He wouldn't have the resources or the backing to pursue it. I spent the day inside with Barnaby.
We watched movies. We ignored the doorbell. I saw HOA's house from my upstairs window. The blinds were drawn tight. The lights were off. It looked like a tomb. The criminal trial was 3 days later. It was the event of the century for our small town. When I pulled up to the courthouse, I had to wait for security to clear a path through the crowd.
There were people holding signs. Some said justice for Barnaby. Others said lock her up. It was surreal. I was just an accountant who wanted a pool. Now I was the face of the anti-Karen revolution. I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer, Saul. He was wearing his lucky tie, the one with little sharks on it. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning. He told me that the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Mrs. Ramirez, had added 3 new charges based on the grocery store video: witness intimidation, assault, and violation of a protective order. We took our seats in the front row. The gallery was packed. Every seat was full. There were reporters sketching on notepads. There were neighbors I recognized from 3 streets over. Then the side door opened. The bailiff shouted, "All rise." But we weren't rising for the judge yet. We were rising because HOA was entering the building. She walked in with Richard, but the power dynamic had shifted completely. Richard looked like a man who had not slept in a week. His suit was rumpled, his eyes were bloodshot. He wasn't guiding her anymore. He was trailing behind her like a beaten dog. And HOA was in a world of her own. She was wearing a black dress that looked like it was appropriate for a funeral. She had a tissue clutched in her hand. She was looking at the floor, trembling, playing the part of the fragile, misunderstood victim to perfection. The judge entered, Judge Patterson. He was an older man with white eyebrows and a face that looked like it was carved out of granite. He sat down, looked at the packed courtroom, and banged his gavel once. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He looked at the defense table. He looked at HOA. "Mrs. HOA," the judge said, his voice deep and rumbling, "we are here to address the multiple felony charges against you, as well as the new charges filed this week. How do you plead?" Richard stood up. He buttoned his jacket with shaking hands. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty by reason of temporary distress. We would like to request a continuance to allow for a psychiatric evaluation." Judge Patterson lowered his glasses and looked at Richard. "Counselor, your client was seen on video 3 days ago assaulting the victim in a produce aisle. Does that look like distress to you, or does it look like a pattern of harassment?" Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He knew he was fighting a losing battle. He sat back down. The prosecutor, Mrs. Ramirez, stood up. She didn't waste time. She played the hits. She played the video of HOA destroying the pool. The sound of the PVC pipe hacking into the liner filled the silent courtroom. She played the 911 call. HOA's fake screams of terror rang out, contrasting sharply with the video showing Barnaby wagging his tail. Then she played the grocery store video. The courtroom gasped when HOA slapped the phone out of my hand on the giant monitor. They murmured when she grabbed the pickle jar. Mrs. Ramirez paused the video right on HOA's face, twisted in rage, screaming about her husband's power. "Your Honor," Mrs. Ramirez said, "this is not a woman in distress. This is a woman who believes she is above the law. She has terrorized her neighborhood. She has filed false police reports. She has destroyed property. And when ordered by this court to stay away, she attacked the victim in a public place. The state recommends the maximum sentence." The judge nodded slowly. He turned his gaze to HOA. She was staring at the screen, at her own face frozen in high-definition entitlement. Her hands were gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. "Mrs. HOA," the judge said, "do you have anything to say before I pass judgment?" This is usually the part where the defendant stands up, cries, and apologizes. They say they made a mistake. They say they are sorry. But HOA stood up. She smoothed her dress. She took a deep breath, and she looked directly at me. Her eyes weren't sad. They were burning. The mask of the fragile grandmother fell off, and the monster from the backyard was back. "I did nothing wrong," HOA said. Her voice was quiet at first, but it was steady. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the reporters stopped writing. "I am the president of the Homeowners Association," she continued, her voice getting louder. "It is my job to enforce the rules. It is my job to keep the standards high. This man," she pointed a shaking finger at me, "this man brought filth into my community. He brought a beast into a neighborhood with children. He put up a pool that looks like a swamp." Richard tugged on her arm. "HOA, sit down," he hissed. "Stop talking." She slapped his hand away. "Do not touch me," she screamed at her husband. "You are useless. You were supposed to fix this. You were supposed to ruin him. You told me you had the money to make him disappear." Richard put his head in his hands. The entire room gasped. She had just admitted to conspiracy in open court. Ha turned back to the judge. She was shouting now. The veins in her neck were popping out. "You cannot judge me. Do you know who I am? I am Ha. I built this community. I decide what is right and what is wrong. Not you, not the police, me. I am the law in Whispering Pines." She was unraveling. It was a complete psychological collapse. She couldn't handle the reality that she wasn't in control. The judge banged his gavel. "Order," he shouted. "Order in the court." But Ha was past the point of no return.
She grabbed the pitcher of water on the defense table.
"It is all a lie," she shrieked. "That video is fake. He doctored it. He is stalking me. Why is nobody arresting him? Look at him. He is laughing at me."
I wasn't laughing. I was staring in horror. This was the public meltdown I had expected, but it was worse than I imagined. It was raw, unfiltered narcissism screaming into the void. She threw the water pitcher. It didn't hit me. It didn't hit the judge. It smashed against the jury box, shattering glass and splashing water all over the front row of jurors. That was the end. "Bailiffs," the judge roared. "Take her into custody." 2 large officers moved in from the sides of the courtroom. Hua saw them coming. She kicked her chair backward, knocking it over. "Do not come near me," she screamed. "I am a citizen. I have rights. I demand to speak to the manager of this court." It was almost funny. Even as she was being cornered by law enforcement, she was still asking for a manager. It was her default setting. It was the only language she knew. The first bailiff grabbed her arm. Hua spun around and tried to bite him. She actually tried to sink her teeth into the arm of a uniformed officer of the court. The second bailiff grabbed her other arm and forced her hands behind her back. She started kicking, her heels slamming against the floor. She was shrieking, a high-pitched banshee wail that made my teeth hurt. Richard sat there, frozen. He didn't move to help her. He didn't look up. He just stared at the table, watching his life dissolve. As they dragged her toward the side door, the door that leads to the holding cells, Hua locked eyes with me one last time. She wasn't fighting the officers anymore. She was just hanging there, suspended between them, her feet dragging on the carpet. "You will never win," she screamed at me, her voice cracking. "I will be back. I will find you for every blade of grass. I will take your house. I am Hua." The door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens after an explosion. Judge Patterson adjusted his robe. He looked at the wet spot on the carpet where the pitcher had smashed. He looked at Richard, who was still staring at the table. The judge cleared his throat. "Bail is revoked," he said. "The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing. I am also holding her in contempt of court. Mr. Defense Attorney, I suggest you find your client some very serious help." Richard stood up slowly. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. He gathered his papers into his briefcase. He looked at me as he walked past the plaintiff's table. He didn't say anything. He didn't threaten me. There was no anger left in him, just exhaustion.
He walked out of the courtroom alone. The gallery erupted. People were talking, texting, tweeting. Saul leaned over to me and slapped me on the back. "That," he said, "was the most spectacular act of self-destruction I have ever seen. You just won everything, kid." He was right. The sentencing hearing was a formality. 2 weeks later, Ha was sentenced to 3 years in state prison for felony destruction of property, filing a false police report, assault, and resisting arrest. The judge added an extra 6 months for the contempt of court charge. She didn't scream this time. She stood there in an orange jumpsuit, looking small and gray. Without her makeup, without her designer clothes, without her power, she was just a bitter woman who had made a terrible mistake. Richard divorced her while she was in a waiting transfer. He sold the house in the cul-de-sac. He moved 2 states away. I heard he is working as a paralegal now. The civil suit was a slam dunk. With Richard out of the picture and Ha in prison, the court awarded me the full $50,000 from their joint assets before the divorce was finalized. But the money wasn't the best part. The best part was coming home that afternoon after the trial.
I pulled into my driveway. The sun was setting. The neighborhood was quiet. There were no news vans. There were no police cars. I walked into the backyard. My new pool was shimmering in the twilight. The water was crystal clear. The new solar lights were twinkling on the fence. I let Barnaby out. He ran into the grass, grabbed his favorite tennis ball, and rolled onto his back. I sat down on the edge of the deck and dangled my feet in the water. I looked at the spot where the gate used to be, the gate Ha had smashed through with her bolt cutters. It was fixed now, reinforced with steel. I thought about the journey, the trash can, the clicking heels, the notes on the door, the shattered glass, the pickle jar. It had been a war, a stupid, unnecessary war over control and ego, but it was over. I took a sip of my iced tea and looked at the empty house down the street. The for sale sign was gone. A new family was moving in next week, a nice couple with 2 kids and a golden retriever puppy. I smiled. Section 4, paragraph 2 of the bylaws says that residents must maintain a peaceful and harmonious environment. Finally, for the first time since I bought this house, I was in full compliance. I called Barnaby over. He trotted up, wet nose bumping my hand. I scratched him behind the ears. "We won, buddy," I whispered. "We won." Barnaby barked. It was a happy bark, and nobody, absolutely nobody, was there to write it down.
You might think the story ends there. You might think seeing Hoa in an orange jumpsuit was the final chapter. But in the world of high-stakes neighborhood drama, there is always an epilogue. And trust me, you are going to want to hear about what we found inside her house. It was about 2 months after the sentencing. The legal dust had settled. Hoa was securely locked away in a state facility, probably trying to report the warden for wearing the wrong shade of uniform. Her husband, Richard, had finalized the divorce and abandoned the property. Since the mortgage payments had stopped, the bank foreclosed on the house. That meant one thing: an estate sale, followed by an open house. For years, Hoa's house had been a fortress. Nobody had ever been invited inside. We used to joke that she probably slept in a cryogenic chamber to preserve her icy demeanor. So when the real estate sign went up and the doors opened for public viewing, the entire neighborhood showed up. We did not go because we wanted to buy a 4-bedroom colonial with a 3-car garage. We went because we wanted to see the lair of the beast. We wanted closure. I walked over with Mr. Henderson. It was a Saturday morning, much like the one where she first measured my trash can. We walked up the driveway, past the perfectly manicured hedges that Richard had paid a fortune to maintain. The front door was open. Stepping inside was like walking into a hospital. Everything was white. The walls were white, the carpets were white, the furniture, which was being tagged for the estate sale, was cream or beige. There was no color anywhere. It was sterile. It was cold. It felt exactly like her. There were no family photos on the walls, no knickknacks, no signs of life. It was a showroom designed to intimidate, not a home designed for living. But the real revelation was upstairs. I wandered up to the 2nd floor, looking for the master bedroom. I found a room at the front of the house that faced the cul-de-sac. It was obviously Hoa's office. The desk had been cleared out, but there were indentations in the carpet near the window. 3 distinct circles in the plush white pile. I realized what they were. They were the marks of a tripod. I looked out the window. From this vantage point, you could see everything. You could see my backyard, you could see Mr. Henderson's porch, you could see the mailboxes. This wasn't just an office. This was a command center. For years, Hoa had stood at this window with a telescope or a camera, watching us. She hadn't just stumbled upon our so-called violations. She had hunted for them. Mr. Henderson called me over to the closet. He had found a box that the movers had missed. It was tucked on a high shelf. Inside was a stack of spiral-bound notebooks.
I picked one up and opened it. It was a log, a detailed handwritten log of our lives. May 4th, 3:14 post-meridium. The subject in house number 4 brought home groceries, left bags on counter visible through window for 20 minutes, violation of clutter ordinance. June 12th, 8:05 antemeridium. The Henderson dog urinated on the north side of the driveway, potential soil acidity issue, draft warning letter. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. They were hundreds of entries. She had documented everything. What time we left for work, what visitors we had, what brand of fertilizer we used. It was a manifesto of obsession. Reading those pages was chilling, but it was also incredibly vindicating. We weren't crazy. We weren't bad neighbors. We were victims of a woman who had filled the empty void in her life with surveillance and control. We took the notebooks to the estate agent, who looked horrified and promised to dispose of them, but just knowing they existed was enough. It proved that the problem was never us. It was always HOA. The house sold a month later, and this is where the universe really decided to serve up a slice of poetic justice. The buyers were not a retired couple looking for quiet. They were not corporate climbers looking for status. The buyers were a family of 5, a loud, happy, chaotic family. They had 3 boys under the age of 10. They had a drum set. They had a trampoline. And best of all, they had a grandmother who loved gardening. Within 2 weeks of moving in, the new owners painted the front door a bright, cheerful turquoise. HOA would have had a stroke if she saw it. Then they dug up the perfectly square hedges and planted wild, flowing flower beds. They put up a basketball hoop in the driveway. The silence of the cul-de-sac was replaced by the sound of kids laughing, basketballs bouncing, and occasionally a very enthusiastic drum solo from the garage. To anyone else, it might have been noisy. To us, it sounded like freedom. I introduced myself to the father, a nice guy named Mike, while he was putting up the hoop. I didn't tell him the whole horror story. I didn't want to spook him. I just told him that the previous owner was a bit strict about the rules. Mike laughed. He told me that was funny because when they closed on the house, the HOA board sent them a welcome basket with a note that said, "Please feel free to paint your door any color you want." That was the moment I knew the culture had changed. The darkness had lifted, but HOA had one last card to play. One final desperate attempt to assert her dominance from beyond the subdivision. About 6 months into her sentence, I received a letter in the mail.
The return address was the State Correctional Facility for Women. The handwriting on the envelope was jagged and spiky. I sat down at my kitchen table, Barnaby at my feet, and opened it. It was written on lined yellow paper. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was a citation. Ha had drawn a crude box at the top of the page that looked like the HOA letterhead. She had written, "Violation Notice," in bold, underlined letters. Below that, she wrote, "To the resident of house number 6, you are hereby notified that you are in violation of the moral code of Whispering Pines. You have conspired to imprison a community leader. You have defamed the character of a president. You have allowed a dangerous animal to roam free. The fine for this violation is $1 million. Please remit payment immediately to my commissary account. Signed, President Ha." I stared at the letter. $1 million to her commissary account? I didn't get angry. I didn't get scared. I started laughing. I laughed until my sides hurt. I laughed until tears ran down my face. It was just so pathetic. Even in prison, surrounded by actual criminals, she was still playing pretend. She was still trying to be the boss of a neighborhood she no longer lived in. She was delusional. I didn't burn the letter. I didn't throw it away. I went to the store and bought a nice, expensive mahogany frame. I framed that letter. I hung it in my pool house, right next to the mini fridge. It serves as a reminder that no matter how much power someone thinks they have, they can lose it all in a heartbeat if they push people too far. It is a trophy of the war I won. Whenever I have guests over for a barbecue, they ask about the framed letter. I tell them the story of the Great Pool War. We read the part about the $1 million fine, and we toast to freedom. Life is good now. The summer is here again. The pool is open. The water is perfect. Barnaby is currently chasing a butterfly near the new reinforced steel gate. The HOA still exists, but it is different. I know this because I am the treasurer now. We voted to slash the rulebook by 80.
She has a cell where everything is uniform, where the schedule is rigid, and where the rules are absolute. In a twisted way, she got exactly what she always wanted. As for me, I will take the chaos. I will take the turquoise door down the street. I will take the drum solos. I will take the dog hair on the sofa. Because that is what a home is. It is not a museum. It is not a spreadsheet. It is a place where you can breathe. And if anyone ever tries to tell me that my trash can is 3 inches too far to the left again, I have a very simple answer prepared. I will point to the camera, I will point to the dog, And I will say, go ahead, make my day. Justice has been served, and it tastes like a cold drink on a hot afternoon by a pool that is strictly, happily, and permanently against the rules.
Looking back at the scorched earth campaign Hua waged against a swimming pool, I am still struck by the sheer, unadulterated cost of her ego. We are talking about a woman who had it all. She lived in a pristine white-on-white fortress. She drove a luxury vehicle that cost more than my college tuition. She had a husband who, despite being a spineless enabler for years, was a high-powered attorney capable of burying almost anyone in legal paperwork. She was the queen of her little suburban kingdom, and she traded all of that away because she could not handle the sight of a golden retriever and a few thousand gallons of chlorinated water. It is genuinely fascinating to break down the mathematics of her downfall. If she had simply ignored my trash can that first Tuesday, she would still be drinking organic wine on her patio. If she had just let me build the pool without storming the property like a rhinestone commando, she would still be the president of the association. But that is the thing about people like Hua. They do not know how to stop. To them, a boundary is not a line you respect. It is a challenge you have to bulldoze. I honestly believe she thought she was the hero of this story, right up until the moment the cell door slammed shut. In her mind, she was the martyr protecting the sanctity of the neighborhood aesthetic. She truly believed that throwing a pickle jar in a grocery store was a justifiable act of self-defense against a man buying milk. That level of delusion is terrifying, but it is also what makes her downfall so satisfying. It was not bad luck that took her down. It was her own personality. She was the architect of her own destruction, brick by brick, scream by scream. And let us not forget the role of Richard in this tragedy. He is the cautionary tale for every partner who thinks they can just pay their way out of their spouse's bad behavior. He spent years cleaning up her messes, writing checks and threatening people into silence. But eventually, the mess gets too big for a checkbook. Eventually, the viral video gets too many views. When he walked out of that courtroom, he looked like a man waking up from a 20-year coma. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. Then I remember he tried to bribe me with $10,000 to delete the footage of his wife attacking my dog, and the sympathy evaporates. The real tragedy here, if you want to call it that, is that Hua never learned a thing. That letter demanding $1 million for her commissary account is proof. She is sitting in a concrete box, wearing scratchy orange fabric, eating food that definitely is not organic, and she still thinks she can issue fines. She's probably writing citations to the other inmates for not making their beds to her standards. I give it 6 months before she tries to form an inmate homeowners association and gets thrown into solitary confinement for trying to speak to the warden's manager. There is a lesson here for everyone. It is not just about following the rules or being a good neighbor. It is about knowing when you have lost. It is about understanding that you cannot bully the entire world into submission. Hoa thought her title gave her power. She thought her money gave her immunity. But in the age of high-definition security cameras and the internet, nobody is untouchable. If you act like a monster, the world will treat you like one. I also think about the new family in her old house. The kids playing basketball, the turquoise door, the messy flower beds. That is what a neighborhood is supposed to look like. It's supposed to be lived in. Hoa wanted a museum. She wanted a sterile, silent backdrop for her own vanity. She treated people like props in her play, and when the props started going off script, she panicked. Now the neighborhood is alive again. The property values did not tank because of my pool or the unkempt edges. In fact, prices have gone up because people actually want to live here now that the Wicked Witch of the West is serving 3 to 5. As for Barnaby and me, we are doing just fine. The settlement money is sitting in a high-yield savings account, earning interest that pays for his premium kibble and my pool maintenance. Every time I look at that new reinforced steel gate, I am reminded that sometimes you have to fight for your peace. You have to stand your ground. And sometimes you just have to let the crazy person hand you a felony conviction on a silver platter. If you ever find yourself dealing with a Hoa, remember this story. Do not engage in a shouting match. Do not try to out-crazy them. Just buy a good camera, keep your receipts, and let them dig their own grave. Because they always will. They cannot help themselves. They will escalate until they explode, and all you have to do is stand back, press record, and watch the fireworks. I am going to go outside now.
The sun is shining, the water is 80 degrees, and I think I hear the faint sound of a drum solo coming from down the street. It is loud, it is chaotic, it is absolutely against the old bylaws, and it is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. Stay safe out there, and remember, smile. You never know who is recording.